The Civil War ended in May 1923, and 3 months later, the first general election under the new constitution was held. The victorious, pro-treaty Cumann Gael, which later became Fine Gael, then faced the task of creating a new state from the inherited divisions of civil war and responded with cautious, conservative government. The most pressing task for the new government was the need to have their authority recognised and respected. The threat of an uprising by defeated irregulars and the assassination of Minister Kavana underlined this problem. Support was sought and won from the petty bourgeois farmers and businessmen, and from the hugely influential Catholic Church, proof, if any were needed, for Ulster Protestants that the South was a papist state from which they were best separated. In 1925, the Boundary Commission found that the border should remain as it had been since the treaty. A tripartite agreement signed by Northern Ireland, the Free State and Britain accepted and confirmed this conclusion. In 1932, Fianna Fáil, formed by De Valera to replace Sinn Féin, won their first general election. De Valera's reign of power, which would span 4 decades, was even more conservative than the first government. The beginning of secession from the Commonwealth was marked in 1936 by the removal of Crown involvement in Irish affairs. The following year saw the introduction of a new constitution, much of which remains today. It included an extremely oppressive view of women's role in society, which became a major bone of contention in the latter half of the 20th century. An indigenous minority, once known as tinkers, as their most common trade was tinsmithing, and since known as travellers, lead a nomadic lifestyle traced by some to the dispossessions of the 17th and 18th century plantations and the evictions of the 19th century. Attempts at settling and integrating these travellers have generally failed, as a minority antisocial element of their community has caused prejudice against travellers in general. This is a deeply problematic situation which is still a long way from being resolved. De Valera's policies of industrial protectionism paid scant attention to the reality of increasing unemployment, poverty and mass emigration. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 saw Ireland opting for neutrality and declaring a state of emergency. Although officially neutral, Ireland supported Britain by sharing airspace and intelligence, while large numbers of Irish citizens enlisted in the British Army. But the result of De Valera's insistence on official neutrality was the rejection of Churchill's offer of an end to partition in the north in exchange for alignment with the Allies. The socio-economic depression of rising unemployment and prices, together with the rationing of food and fuel which characterized the emergency years, continued after the war. Combined with the repressive nature of a church-driven state, these were push factors, while the easy availability of work, cheap passage and proximity of Britain were pull factors for the new wave of mass emigration between 1946 and 60. The Free State, which had become the Republic of Ireland in 1949, remained economically and culturally stagnant until the early 60s. De Valera's vision of a rural-based, holy nation, keeping the perceived dangers of modernity outside its borders, did not encourage progress. However, under the leadership of Sean Lemass and economic proposals of T.K. Whitaker, a more modern and progressive Ireland began to appear. These changes continued into the 70s under Jack Lynch, with Ireland joining the European Community in 1972. In the meantime, the civil rights crisis in America fueled a desire for change in Northern Ireland. A civil rights movement seeking reform of the North's electoral discrimination, unfair housing allocation, biased police force, etc., was resisted by the Protestant community and soon resulted in widespread violence. Britain sent in troops to keep the peace, who were welcomed at first, but when they attacked Catholic areas, the IRA was revived to defend the Catholic population. A vicious and ultimately futile war developed, claiming thousands of lives, every one of which drove the wedge between the two communities ever deeper. Violence spread to mainland Britain, where IRA bombings resulted in innocent men and women being jailed, most notably the Guildford 4 and Birmingham 6. Attempts to resolve the conflict are consistently obstructed by a minority on both sides. However, As I conclude these recordings, the IRA declaration of an end to violent methods offers fresh hope for a more peaceful future.